I found the receipt inside an old hardcover copy of the complete stories of O. Henry, a book I had not opened in at least 15 years. It was faded almost white, folded twice, and dated October 2005. The store was a small department store in Paducah, Kentucky, a town where I was certain I had never set foot at that point in my life. The purchase was paid in cash. Most of the items were ordinary: 2 shirts, a package of socks, a shaving kit. Then I saw the last line: men's will coat, charcoal. I knew that coat. My wife, Caroline, gave me one exactly like it for my 50th birthday. I wore it for years. It had a narrow stitch seam inside the left cuff, where she repaired a tear after I caught on a metal filing cabinet. I had always believed she bought it in Cincinnati. My name is Martin Keller. I was 68 when I found the receipt. I had retired from servicing commercial kitchen equipment in hotels and hospitals around Ohio. I spent most of my working life fixing steam tables, dishwashers, ovens, and refrigeration units. Machines taught me that the obvious failure is often only the place where a deeper problem finally becomes visible. The receipt had one handwritten mark near the bottom, a small letter M inside a circle. Caroline used to mark my belongings that way when she packed for trips. She said I was capable of losing a jacket in an empty room, so the receipt had not drifted into our house by accident. Caroline had handled it. The date bothered me next. On that exact week in October, I had been in Columbus taking care of my father after minor surgery. Caroline told me she stayed home in Dayton because her mother was visiting. Her mother had been dead for almost 3 years. I sat at the dining room table with the receipt under the lamp. Caroline had died 8 years earlier. For all that time, I had believed the gray coat was a simple birthday gift. Now I knew she had bought it in Kentucky. On a week, she had lied about where she was. And somebody had hidden the proof inside a book neither of us ever read twice. Caroline and I had been married 27 years when she bought the coat. We were not one of those couples who finished each other's sentences. We interrupted each other too much for that. But we had a comfortable rhythm. She worked in scheduling at a medical clinic. I traveled for service calls. Our daughter, Elise, was in graduate school in North Carolina by then. There had been one difficult period around that time. My younger cousin, Darren, came back into our lives. Calling him my cousin was technically correct and emotionally misleading. We grew up almost like brothers. His mother died young, and he spent summers at our house. He was funny, generous, and unreliable in equal measure. By 2005, Darren was 46 and drifting again. He had worked construction, warehouse jobs, and maintenance at an apartment complex. He also had a habit of walking away whenever life became embarrassing. That fall, he called me asking for work. I told him I had nothing. He asked for money. I said no. He became angry. "You always like helping when you got to decide the terms," he told me. I hung up on him. Caroline thought I was too hard. "He isn't asking because he enjoys it," she said. "He has been asking for 20 years. That doesn't mean every time is the same." I remember telling her, "Then you help him." She looked at me in a way I did not understand then. Maybe I had already given her permission without knowing it. I called Elise about the receipt. She remembered the coat immediately. "You wore it to my graduation. Do you remember your mother going to Kentucky?" A pause. "No." "Did she know anyone in Paducah?" Another pause, longer this time. "Dad, why are you asking?" I told her. She went quiet. Then she said, "There was something weird about that coat." "What?" "Mom didn't give it to you on your birthday." I frowned. Of course she did. "No. She told you she had ordered the wrong size and it came late." That was true. I had forgotten. My birthday was in September. The coat appeared almost a month later. Elise said, "And Darren was there the night she gave it to you." That detail opened the next door. I had forgotten that too. Darren was living in Evansville, Indiana. I had not spoken to him in 11 years. I found his number through Elise. Apparently, they exchanged Christmas messages every few years, something else I had never known. He answered on the 4th ring. "Martin?" His voice had aged. "So you still recognize me?" I'd recognize that tone anywhere. I almost smiled. Then I asked about Paducah. Silence. Darren, what about it? Did Caroline go there in October 2005? He did not answer directly. Instead, he said, "You found something. A receipt." He let out a slow breath. I wonder where she put that. That sentence confirmed more than I wanted. Did you go with her? Yes. Why? We had business there. What business? Not the kind you're thinking. I did not know what I was thinking yet. Then he added, "The coat was mine first." I gripped the phone tighter. What does that mean? She bought it for me. I looked at the receipt again. The charcoal wool coat. My coat! Darren explained that Caroline had taken him to Paducah because he'd been offered a maintenance job at a riverfront hotel. The manager was an old acquaintance of hers from the clinic system. Darren needed decent clothes for the interview. Caroline bought the shirts, socks, shaving kit, and coat. Why didn't you keep it? I did for a few days. What happened? Darren hesitated. I didn't take the job. I felt my old irritation return. Of course you didn't. Martin, she drove you across 2 states, bought you clothes, found you work, and you walked away? That's what it looked like. I heard the warning in his voice, but ignored it. Then she gave me the coat. Yes. Why? I thought you knew. I knew nothing. Darren said quietly, that was the point. Before we hung up, I asked one last question. What does the M in the circle mean? He was silent again. Then he said, it doesn't stand for Martin. That small handwritten mark I had taken as mine suddenly belonged to someone else. Darren agreed to meet me halfway in Louisville. We chose a diner near the interstate because neither of us wanted the intimacy of a home. He looked thinner than I remembered, with gray hair and careful movements. For years I had pictured him as permanently younger, frozen in the age when I stopped trusting him. I placed a receipt on the table. He touched the faded edge but did not pick it up. The M was for Michael, he said. I stared at him. Who is Michael? My son. I thought he was joking. Darren had never had children. At least, that was what I believed. He told me about a woman named Renee Parker, someone he had known in his 20s. They separated before she knew she was pregnant. By the time she contacted him, Michael was already several years old. Darren tried briefly to be involved. Then he disappeared again. I wasn't ready, he said. That's your answer for everything. I know. Michael grew up with Renee in western Kentucky. By 2005, he was 21 and struggling after dropping out of community college. He had started working nights at the hotel in Paducah. Caroline knew about him. I did not. How? I asked. She found out from Aunt Ruth. My mother had known. That hurt in a different place. Darren said Caroline contacted Michael and arranged a hotel interview for him. Not for Darren. The clothes were meant for Michael. Then why did you tell me they were yours? Because I wasn't ready to tell you the rest. I leaned back. What rest? Darren looked toward the window. Michael didn't know I was his father. The trip to Paducah was supposed to be a first meeting. Caroline convinced Darren to go. She bought the clothes because Michael had an interview the next morning and had shown up wearing a borrowed jacket 2 sizes too big. The handwritten M marked the bag Caroline intended to leave with him. So, how did I end up with the coat? Darren rubbed his thumb along the receipt. Because Michael wouldn't take it. Why? He found out who I was. I looked at him, and he wanted nothing from me. The coat had not been a gift rejected by Darren. It had been rejected by a son who had just learned the truth about his father. That was the first part of the story I had completely misunderstood. I had assumed Caroline secretly helped Darren because she thought I was cruel. The truth was more complicated. She had been trying to help Darren meet a son he had abandoned. The receipt led naturally to the book. I asked Darren why Caroline kept it. He said he did not know. So I went back through the book where I found it. On the inside cover, written lightly in pencil, was a date for November of 2005 and initial CK. Caroline had bought the book used. A small bookstore sticker inside listed an address in Paducah. I called. The shop had closed, but the former owner, Marcy Bell, still lived nearby. She remembered Caroline because Caroline returned several times over a period of months. She wasn't much of a fiction reader, Marcy told me. You're right about that. She bought that Henry collection because a young man working nearby liked short stories. Michael, Marcy remembered him too. He came into the store during lunch breaks. According to her, Caroline sometimes left books for him with notes tucked inside. That gave me an uncomfortable thought. Was she hiding correspondence from Darren? No, Marcy said. From you. I felt anger rise. Why would she do that? Marcy paused. I don't know, but she always paid cash and never put a return address on anything. I drove to Paducah. The old hotel had been renovated, but the building still stood near the river. A manager there found Michael Parker in an old employee directory. He had worked maintenance for nearly 3 years. The hotel had no current address. Darren did. He gave it to me reluctantly. Michael lived in Bowling Green. Before I called, I asked Darren one question. Did Caroline keep seeing him? Yes. For how long? Until she got sick. My stomach tightened. Caroline had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2011. She died 5 years later. For almost a decade, she had maintained a relationship with Michael, a young man I did not know existed, a young man connected to my family. And she never told me. At that point, I stopped seeing her secrecy as kindness. It looked like a separate life. Michael agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Bowling Green. He was 42, broad-shouldered, with Darren's eyes and none of his nervous energy. I brought the receipt. When I placed it on the table, he smiled faintly. She kept that? Apparently. He looked at the handwritten M. She put that on everything she bought me. The explanation was simple. The mark did stand for Michael. Caroline labeled the bag because Darren had another bag of clothes in the car from a thrift store. She did not want them mixed up. Small detail. No secret code. That was how most truth looked once you reached it. I asked why he refused the coat. Michael took his time. Because I thought it was from my father. It was from Caroline. He explained that after learning Darren was his father, he became furious. Darren had appeared expecting a conversation that Michael did not owe him. Caroline did not defend Darren. She said only, "You don't have to forgive him today." Michael respected that. He refused everything Darren brought. But after Darren left, Caroline returned alone. She gave Michael the shirts and shaving kit. He accepted those because he needed them for work. He refused the coat. Why? Because it was expensive, and I didn't want to feel bought. Caroline brought it home. Then, several weeks later, she gave it to me. I asked Michael why she kept visiting. At first, because she felt responsible. For what? For pushing the meeting. Michael said Caroline believed she had forced two people into a conversation before either was ready. Over time, the relationship changed. She became a kind of aunt to him, not a replacement mother, not a secret parent, just somebody dependable. Why keep me out of it? I asked. Michael looked surprised. She said you didn't want to know. I felt cold. She said that? Not exactly. What exactly? He thought for a moment. She said you had already made your decision about Darren, and she didn't want it to become another argument between you. That sounded like Caroline. It also sounded unfair. I had judged Darren. I had not judged Michael. But Caroline never gave me the chance to know the difference. When I got home, I opened the box where I kept Caroline's old calendars. She had written very little in them. Appointments, birthdays, doctor visits. But after knowing what to look for, I found Paducah trips disguised as ordinary errands. Bookstore, clinic supply, CM. That last notation appeared dozens of times. Then, in a calendar from 2010, I found something else. Martin meeting. Ask first. The next day had been crossed out. No meeting happened. I called Elise. Did your mother ever talk about introducing me to someone named Michael? She sighed. Yes. I closed my eyes. You knew too. Not at first. When? A few years before she got sick. Why didn't you tell me? Because Mom asked me not to. I was tired of that answer. Everyone seems to have accepted that as enough. Elise became sharper. Dad, you need to remember who you were then. I almost ended the call. Instead, I listened. She reminded me of the year Darren relapsed into drinking after losing another job. He called our house repeatedly. I told Caroline that helping him only taught him to fail more comfortably. I said, some people use family as permission not to change. Michael overheard that sentence. He was visiting Caroline. At our house. I had been in the garage. I never saw him. Michael assumed I meant Darren, and anyone connected to him. He told Caroline not to introduce us. That shifted something in me. Caroline had intended to tell me. Michael asked her not to, but that still did not explain the receipt. Why preserve the one piece of evidence that could expose the entire hidden relationship? I went back to the Henry book. Inside the page where the receipt had been folded was a story Caroline had underlined. One sentence had a pencil mark beside it. Not a note, just a vertical line. At the bottom of the page, she had written, "Someday let him find this himself." The receipt was not accidentally forgotten. Caroline had deliberately preserved it. She had hidden the truth and planted the trail to it in the same place. Darren knew why. When I called, he asked me to come back to Louisville. We sat in the same diner. This time he brought no excuses. Caroline made me promise not to give you the book while she was alive, he said. Why? Because the story changed. He explained that Michael eventually became willing to meet me. That happened after Caroline's cancer diagnosis. She planned a dinner at our house. Then she canceled it. Not because of me, because of Darren. He had started drinking again. He called Michael asking for another chance, and then became angry when Michael would not immediately forgive him. Michael backed away from the entire family. Caroline blamed herself for reopening the relationship. She thought if she brought you into it, you'd try to fix everything, Darren said. Maybe I would have. Exactly. Then he told me the part that finally made the receipt make sense. Caroline did not preserve it mainly for me. She preserved it for Michael. She wanted proof that the first trip to Paducah had not been a scheme by Darren. The receipt showed the clothes, the date, and the cash purchase. The little M showed that Caroline had bought the items for Michael before she knew whether he would ever accept Darren. She wanted Michael to understand that somebody had arrived that day thinking about him as a person, not as a debt to be collected. Years later, Michael told her he finally understood. He did not need the receipt anymore. Caroline kept it because she believed I might someday need the same evidence for a different reason. She knew that after her death, I might discover Michael through Elise or Darren. She also knew I would likely assume the worst, that she had betrayed me, that she had chosen Darren over me, that she had hidden a whole relationship because she did not trust me. Some of that was true, but not all of it. She had preserved the receipt, so I could follow the story in the same order she had lived it. First suspicion, then anger, then context, then the uncomfortable realization that love can involve choices you still wish someone had made differently. I met Michael again in the spring. This time Darren came too. We did not call a family reunion. That would have demanded more warmth than the room could honestly hold. We ate lunch at a barbecue place outside Bowling Green. Darren apologized. Not beautifully. He stumbled through it. He admitted he had spent years wanting forgiveness before proving he could be trusted. Michael listened. Then he said, "I don't hate you." Darren nodded. That's more than I expected. It was not reconciliation. It was a beginning. My relationship with Michael developed separately. We started with occasional phone calls. He had a wife, 2 teenagers, and a maintenance business of his own. The first time he asked me a question about a commercial refrigerator, I laughed. What? Nothing. Caroline would enjoy this. He understood. The gray coat is gone now. I wore it until the lining tore badly enough that repairing it stopped making sense. I donated it years before finding the receipt. For a while, that bothered me. I wished I had kept it. Then I realized the coat had already done its work. It had started as clothing for a young man who did not want anything from the father who abandoned him. It became my birthday gift because Caroline could not bear to waste something chosen with hope. And for years, I wore it without knowing I was carrying a piece of story she was not ready to tell me. The receipt remains inside the O. Henry book. I no longer keep it hidden between the same pages. I framed it in a simple glass frame on the shelf beside Caroline's photograph. The ink is fading. The store name is barely visible now. The charcoal coat line can still be read if the light is right. And near the bottom, inside a small hand-drawn circle, is that letter M. For weeks, I thought it was the proof that Caroline had lied to me. Now I see it differently. It was the only part of the receipt she made personal. Not my initial. Not hers. Michael's. The person none of us knew how to bring into the family, without reopening every old wound. Caroline did not solve that problem. Neither did I. But she kept one small piece of paper long enough for me to understand what she had been trying to protect. I still wish she had trusted me sooner. I also know now why she was afraid to. Both things can be true. The receipt is almost 20 years old, and one day the ink may disappear completely. I think that is why I look at it more carefully now than I did when every word was easy to read.